Let's talk about student loan forgiveness. The Biden administration, you may recall, has been promising that it will do some kind of student loan forgiveness. In fact, this was a promise on the campaign trail.
Right. $10,000 was his promise.
Yes, and $10,000 is exactly what he delivered on today. Now, is this good timing because the economy is hard, or is this opportunistic timing because November elections loom? Well, you can be the judge of that. But we're going to give you the details, and we're going to break down the math. We're going to tell you who this helps and who this harms. And I'm going to this is a spoiler alert, it's inconsistent. Right? Doesn't help everybody. It helps some people. So buckle up first. Let's do some maths, as they say in the UK. So the program will forgive $10,000 in student loans for people who make less than $125,000 per year, and $20,000 for those who used Pell Grants, which confused me a little because Pell Grants typically do not have to be paid back. But I guess this means for some people who then have been on the hook to pay them back because their circumstances change, then they're going to get $20,000 in loan forgiveness. That means poof, it disappears from the liabilities on your balance sheet. You no longer owe it, right? Now, usually loan forgiveness is taxed as income, but the administration will allow this loan forgiveness to go untaxed. So that is also a bit of an extra gift, right? $10,000 of tax-free wealth increase, right? The White House says this means about 15 million people who have a balance of $10,000 or more will see that wiped away. But about 40 million Americans have student loan debt. So this is less than 40%, but okay. It will help some people. Let's put up this graphic that the president tweeted today when this was announced. These are all the details, right? $10,000 without a Pell Grant, $20,000 with forgiveness for this income level. And also, it will freeze student loan payments. You would recall student loan payments were frozen during the pandemic, and then this freeze continued to be extended. So they are extending it now. It's not pandemic related, but I guess it's related to the economic crisis, right?
It's election related.
He did say this is the last time they're going to do this. So loans you should expect to start back up in January. Now, of course, this announcement has been delayed several times. So if we're saying, well, he just was waiting until the economy was shit, I guess, right? Or election related.
Well,
yes.
I guess you don't play this trump card, right? So you're holding it. And everyone was, Elizabeth Warren was pushing for $50,000 in student loan forgiveness, right? Senator Warren and Chuck Schumer came together and gave a speech where they were like, we're going to go 50,000. We want the president to go to $50,000 in student loan forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
So then they held off on it. And now, as we're entering the doldrums at the end of the summer, going into the midterm elections, wouldn't you? And we're going back to college, right? We're going back to school.
Yeah.
Here we go. President Biden comes in on a horse. By the way, if you can believe it, his approval ratings have been going up. Do you know why? Because he hasn't given any speeches.
Okay.
He's not going near any podium, any television camera for an interview. So this is the strategy. Keep them away from cameras and then give people free money.
Well, let's look at who is actually benefiting from this and ask ourselves whether or not these people will continue to remember this in a few months when it's time for election. So we're going to use the Penn-Wharton model, which is a nonpartisan group of economists and data scientists, because in advance of this announcement, they had been running analysis models on what they thought were the hypotheticals, because they did run models on $10,000 forgiveness. They ran models on $50,000 with and without the income requirement. So if you look at this chart and you see the different hypotheticals, right? The first one is whether or not they'd forgive $10,000 without an income gap or forgive $50,000 with an income cap. So what they actually ended up announcing, I circled here in red, or I boxed in red. So which income group will be most benefited by this? Well, it's mostly second quintile, middle quintile, and fourth quintile. So it is this sort of middle class, right, group of income that will be helped by this in the most proportion, which is okay, right? But what will it do to the rest of us who do not have this debt or do not qualify for the debt? The answer is inflation, right? Economist Larry Summers even had been warning that this could contribute to inflation as well as push existing tuitions to increase, which is what these models show. Why? Because it will free up discretionary income for some people, putting more money into the economy. And what is if inflation is too much money after too few goods? This does not create more goods for us to buy. It only puts more money. And that's problematic because this also leads to inflation. Also, loan forgiveness would, of course, be for federal loans. So these are assets that are on the government's balance sheet that the government will now write off. So who makes up for that shortfall? Taxpayers. And how much will this cost? Well, a lot, actually. Let's go back to this Wharton model estimate that, again, we looked through the different hypotheticals. What we got is income level of 125, max forgiveness of 10K. So I circled that column. If you play out the costs year over year for the next 10 years, this will cost taxpayers $329 billion over the next 10 years. So you could say that those of us who are not benefiting from this are paying for those of us who did, right? And so the Penn-Wharton model draws this conclusion of these things that will or could happen. It says if student loan debt forgiveness is ongoing, students might eventually reorganize their finances towards additional borrowing. So you'll say to yourself, well, 10,000 will be written off, so I'll just take on more, right? That's one thing. Moreover, students might choose to attend qualifying education providers, including students who might otherwise have a harder time with repayment. So it might it encourages more debt because, oh, well, some of it could just poof away, right? The inclusion of these two effects could, to some extent, make the program a bit more progressive while increasing budgetary costs. A third effect could also emerge. Some of the benefits from debt forgiveness might be captured by colleges themselves in the form of higher prices, both tuition and net. So what this means is that colleges can increase their prices, which they're gonna do.
They're gonna do already anyway.
Because
Yes.
they've had a tuition freeze for the last 2.5 years. And of course, inflation hits universities too. It costs them more to hire staff. It costs them more to buy cleaning supplies. It costs them more to keep the lights on, right? And so those prices, the tuition prices that have been frozen for the last 2.5 years, are inevitably going to raise. And so, that will be recovered.
And I think I'm going to argue at an exponential rate, because since the 1980s, they have been on a tear. Prices at universities have been on a skyrocket. Then they put on this cap during the pandemic. Of course, once that you pull that lever off, boom, it's going back skyrocketing
Right.
again.
Well, take a look at the average tuition for last academic school year. I actually have a graph here from U.S. News and World Reports. So private universities have an average of $38,000. This is single year tuition. As far as I could tell, I looked really hard for this. I think it says the 2021, 2022. Even $38,000 for a single year for a private university, I thought sounded low when you think of the Harvards and the Yales of the world, but okay. Public out-of-state universities, $22,000, and public in-state universities, $10,000. So $10,000 of relief will get you a single year, right?
This is highway robbery.
Yes, but how many degrees can you get with 1 year of tuition? Not very many, right? So, okay, but it's nice, right? But again, this is a one-time transaction of debt forgiveness. It's not saying you can now go out and take on more debt, although current students will be eligible. But it's a one-time transfer of wealth, right? For people who arguably don't have a ton of wealth, but it's taking liabilities off of people's balance sheets. But it doesn't fix the problem of for-profit student loans, predatory student loans, which abound. Doesn't fix the fact that the U.S. doesn't have higher education for all at all. And it punishes people who either opted not to go to college because they didn't want to take on this debt. So think about now you're 28, 29, 30 years old, and you're like, oh, well, I didn't go to college because my family couldn't afford it. maybe we could have had that loan forgiveness. What did I lose in my recent past, right?
Or maybe, hey, I worked my ass off. I saw someone in the chat, Iced Champagne was your screen name in the chat, just said, I worked my ass off to pay off my student loans, and others saying, hey, why?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
So you cannot file bankruptcy on a student loan. Is that only federal, or can you file it on private, or is it both? Like, do they protect both student loans from bankruptcy?
I don't know about the private, but I don't know why that would be exempt. So you'll recall George W. Bush during the Bush administration. This was a big thing for him because here was the strategy. Here's the strategy. First of all, Republicans hate lawyers, right? A lot of them. There's always been this clash between lawyers and the Republican Party. And so what do lawyers do? Well, lawyers, when they would go to law school, they would take on enormous law school debt. Then they would get out and they knew the system, they knew the law. So they would not all of them, but many of them would just file bankruptcy. So they would wipe away their law school debt. This was a strategy, right? And then it would make great money in their law firms, and it didn't matter. Then George W. Bush said, no more of that, and they put the kibosh on bankruptcy for student loan debts. So
yes.
It was largely fueled by the legal lobby. The legal side of things, but I don't know about private versus federal. I know certainly on the federal side it is, but
right. And another thing, I think we've talked about this before, is that universities in the United States have a for-profit system, so they make you repeat core courses that you did in high school because they charge you a lot per unit to do that. Whereas in other systems around the world, you say, I'm going to university to become an accountant, and you take courses to be an accountant. There's no reason to take PE courses if you're going to be an accountant, right? In college, other than to just, well, I guess, keep your body fit. Sure, there's merit in that argument. Go ahead.
When I went to so I went to college. I went to Ball State in the early 2000s, and I was a senior when I ended up moving to Portland, getting married, and all that jazz. And so when I went back to school to Portland State, they would take my credits, but I still had to do all of those core classes because I needed to be there at least 2 years to graduate. So there was no way to just go in and be like, I'm almost done and just finish up. They're like, no. So I ended up spending a year taking just a bunch of classes that I absolutely didn't need or want.
That are they're running up your bill, right? So this system will not change with any kind of, this really doesn't do very much at all. Now, Elizabeth Warren, who is a proponent of canceling student loan debt, says, well, a lot of this student debt is for people who didn't even obtain the degree. They went there, they got started, and life happened. They got pregnant, they had to take care of a dad, whatever. And so these are people who we should then just help them. It's a wash, right? You didn't get the degree, you have the debt. Okay. Which again, it's fine for those people, right? But if it's costing taxpayers, then we all have to agree that that is wrong. And let's change the system so that that doesn't happen again, right? This is not that.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about this, and I think this is where this is heading, because this debate I see in the chat from people saying, "Hey, look, I paid off my student loans, and it took me years to pay off my student loans to the University of Pittsburgh." And so yesterday, Elizabeth Warren was confronted by a voter. She was giving a speech in Grimes, Iowa. And this person was saying, I understand you're going to, she was just speaking about the student loan forgiveness plan, and she's been a big champion of it. And so she was confronted by a father who's not happy about it. Watch this moment.
I just want to ask one question. My daughter's getting out of school. I saved all my money. She doesn't have any student loans. Am I going to get my money back? Of course not. So you're going to pay for people who didn't save any money, and those of us that did the right thing get screwed.
No, it's not anybody got screwed. When we
Of course we did. My buddy had fun, bought a car, went on vacations. I saved my money. He made more than I did. But I worked a double shift, worked extra. My daughter's worksheet is 10. So you're laughing. Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. We did the right thing, and we get screwed.
I appreciate
That's
it.
all right.
So I get that that's not relevant, one person's situation to another, but that's very hurtful if you have gone through all the sacrifices because you had no other options, and now all of a sudden you have a few options because it's election time?
Well, I think it's very relevant. I mean, this is he's working a double shift.
Yeah.
His daughter, he works so hard so that his daughter won't be in student loan debt because this is the contract. This is the garbage we've been sold by our federal government, right?
Yes.
So we can sort of here's what I want to avoid is that I see on Twitter, I see people like going back and forth with each other, right? Like, so you're either in one camp or you're the other, which is I worked my ass off and I paid off my student loans. Why am I, as a taxpayer, having to foot the bill for this deadbeat over here that can't pay their bill, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one or the other. When the real enemies here is the United States government.
Well,
And-
it's the entire higher educational system from for-profit universities that make you pay $5,000 a credit to take poetry, right?
Yes, but
when you want to be
fueled-
a doctor.
But fueled by the federal government.
Yes, because they are issuing high interest loans.
So when you go to Europe or other areas, I mean, you get free college, and you don't have to repeat any of the garbage classes that you had in high school.
Well, let's not say they're garbage, but
Okay, let me just tell you that I was forced to take history of folk tales just because I had to fulfill certain credit hours. You don't have to do that in Europe or other places because you know what you're going to study. You're going there to study that, and you're not having to fill it with all this extraneous stuff that you have to pay all these additional credit hours for.
Yeah.
So it's all, I think it is in many ways, it is garbage. We see some of these classes that, I mean, we highlight them sometimes in the newsletter. Like you can go take I don't know, like ridiculous, like pop culture weird classes that only,
Sure.
by the way, they only pop up in the United States, these classes. You never hear like,
we don't know. We don't have college age kids.
in the University of Liechtenstein, there's a new Harry Styles class on his, like that's the kind of stuff you only hear about at United States colleges, don't you?
Yes, but because it makes the news. Cryptologia in the chat asks a super chat, which is, do you have to apply or will this automatically be wiped out? It should automatically just drop from your balance unless you were in default. Borrowers who are in default now have to use a program called Fresh Start. This doesn't fix the issues with your credit, obviously, but it does. You should be able to apply for at least that $10,000 amount. And then if you're still in default over that, then it at least is reduced by that amount.
So again,
So
we're
I had
going
to
back
take-
and forth.
I had to take a class.
So go ahead, Philip.
I had to take a class at Portland State. So keep in mind, I was a molecular biology major.
Yeah.
And because I had to do these core curriculum classes to satisfy their requirements, one of the classes I ended up taking was called Cities and the Environment, and it was literally a class about parks in cities. Like they would just look at like how Central Park was designed, and so we had to like write this final paper. And I was at the time I was working full time. I had a wife and kids. Like I was busy. And so I was writing this final paper. I got about 3 paragraphs into it, and I just like completely ran out of energy. Finished the paper by saying, "I just don't have time to finish this," and then sent it to the professor. I literally just was like, "I don't have time for this nonsense," and so that was it. That was like, but those classes. There were so
Wow.
many of those classes I had to take that it was just like, why am I here?
Nancy
I'm not
C.
getting anything out of this.
Nancy C in our chat says, Clayton, you're absolutely right. I had to take 2 meteorology classes in order to complete my psychology degree. No relevance whatsoever. So you needed to study cumulus clouds to know how to deal with a human brain.
There are people who advocate for charging you less for things that don't go into your core major, or there are also programs out there to, have you do your core, things at a junior college so that you save money, right? But these are not things that students are taught, and we feed college age students this dream of like, you're going to live away. It's going to be so fun. You're going to make your best friends of your life. And, you're doing this at a high debt expense.
Right. Or the argument about liberal arts degrees, right? Well, the reason you take these other classes about parks and meteorology and folk tales is because you may not know what you want to do with your life. So spend 2 years at university getting $70,000 in debt to take a folk tales class. By the way, if you don't know what you want to do with your life at 18 years old, don't waste money going to college. Maybe take a year or 2, like a gap year. Just stop. Figure out what you want to do, live on when you're
Ham's
young-
beer is really cheap.
What's that?
Ham's beer, the refresher, it's very cheap.
What is
you
that?
can just do beer.
Just have
you can
beer.
just drink a lot of beer and for like a year and then decide what you want to do.
Don't do that.
'Cause that's what they
You'd
end up doing
definitely be
anyway. It
more
just costs them
well-rounded.
hundreds of $1,000s.
Right. Like I had a roommate, or he was down the hall from me at the University of Pittsburgh. I was in Tower B. If you live in Pittsburgh, you know what that is. And, he didn't like ever go to class. I'm like, why are you even here? He's like, I don't know if I want to even be in college. I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm like, so you're literally here wasting your money and your parents' money to figure it out? I got news for you. Don't go to college and waste that kind of money in the United States. And in Europe, again, you kind of pick your directive. Like, I want to be a lawyer. And so then you go to school to be a lawyer.
Yes.
And you're not
for
wasting.
much less. And you don't have an entire
For free,
working
largely.
class of lawyers that have debt. You don't have an entire working class of doctors that have debt. It's not a thing, right? And so this is it's a one-time thing. It's like you've just sold something, you have this windfall. It's all right for some and it's okay for now, but it does not prevent it doesn't fix the system. It doesn't even get close to fixing the system.
Ali N in our chat says there's a course called The Study of Tupac Philosophies at the University in California. Yes. Yeah. So
I took a course called PAR course, where you just run around, in the park where you see like things where you pull up or a balance beam. And that was a PE course where we would just run around and like go on the balance beam and do pull-ups. And I still can't do a
Did
pull-up.
you yell parkour every time you jumped on something?
And it's not parkour, it's parkours. And I really thought, I was like, okay, by the end of this, I'm going to be able to do a pull-up. And I cannot. So I
America.
did not get my money's worth for that.
America. So the solution is Biden administration is going to hand you $10,000 in student loan forgiveness one time. No real plan to make free university, free college for kids so that we're not drowning in student loan debt in the United States, unlike any other country in the world, by the way.
There is a lot of ire about this on Twitter right now. People are pretty pissed off about how it will be okay for some and not others. And but again, you have to think about people who are planning to have this debt come back into their life regularly. This several $100s that they haven't had to pay during the pandemic, and now it's about to hit again. And for a lot of people, it won't come back, right? And that will free them up to buy groceries and to buy gas. And so for those people, at least we can sort of be happy for those people, while at the same time realizing, though, this is going to cost taxpayers.
Yeah. Also, I'm just curious because Nancy Pelosi told us a few months ago that President Biden can't do this. Like the president of the United States doesn't have the authority and the power to do this. So I'm not sure if he's talked with Nancy or not, but she said this. Take a listen.
People think that the president of the United States, is this more on the subject than you ever want to know? Will you let me know? People think that the president of the United States has the power for debt forgiveness. He does not. He can postpone, he can delay, but he does not have that power. That has to be an act of Congress.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Guess that changed. I don't know. I guess that changed.
Well, I don't know. You could take him to court for that if you'd like to see, sort
I
of
wonder if
pandemic related.
I mean, if they're really upset about it, if Nancy's really upset about it, I wonder if they'll sue him over this.
She's
She just
not.
doesn't seem to care anymore. She's got bedhead.
But I just want to frame this a second. She's thrown in the towel. She's like all those
She's
late
like,
night
I don't
trips
even care
to
anymore. She's got a Kleenex bedhead. She's
all
like,
those late night trips to
my husband's in
Taiwan.
jail.
Yeah, like I'm sleeping on a plane to Taiwan. I got to check on my semiconductors. Today we're complaining about $10,000 in student loan forgiveness. So I did look this up. I did the math on this. That to have free college for Americans would cost $58 billion. Okay, this is first dollar college. So the $58 billion would be the cost. Now, over about 11 years or so, it cost about $800 billion to give free university to Americans. Now, just think about what that would do to the American economy to not have an entire generation saddled with massive amounts of debt, which means they can't go and buy things. Okay, that's one piece of this. The other piece of this is imagine what this would do if we just repositioned the $800 billion a year that we're spending on war. That's our military defense budget, $879 billion a year. In 1 year, that's what we spend on defense. In 1 year, $58 billion is what it would cost for free college for kids in America.
And look what we've sent to Ukraine already.
Yes.
Yeah, we've sent over 60 billion in the past few months to Ukraine.
But again, those student loans are assets on the United States balance sheet, right? And so if I've given you a 12% loan because your parents make around $200,000 a year, so you can't get a favorable loan to go to university, I'm going to charge you 12%. That's on my balance sheet as the government, right? They make money for that. So why would they do that?
Well, all of the benefits that I just talked about. I mean, think about how
That's a benefit for you, not for me, the government, that we've just, as we play this out.
So even federal loans, the federal loans that kids take out for college are not interest free?
No.
They are.
That's ridiculous.
No.
Yeah,
They're based on, and in
is it
fact,
based on credit?
And in fact, as you as you enter the workforce, then those loans adjust every year based on your income. So if you get a nice little raise at work, then your loan payment will go up, and they know it. It's really predatory in how people live like this. You can refinance that debt, but they come back around every year. They look at your tax return and say, did pretty all right last year. Okay, you're going to owe us a little more now.
And if you have trouble paying those bills, by the way, which many Americans do and can't afford to pay back, they can't pay rent, they can't afford groceries. 20 million Americans right now are behind on their energy bills. I saw that statistic this afternoon. So don't worry, though. The 87,000 new IRS agents they just hired who will be armed, they will be ready to come after you to collect on that student loan
And the
debt.
Department of Education also
I
have
forgot
them
about those guys
armed.
that they have armed and dangerous as well.
Well, during the
They
pandemic,
come at you both ways.
during the pandemic, there were federal orders that utility companies could not turn off electricity if people were in arrears. Will that continue to happen? Who knows?
Yeah.
Winter is coming.